Hey guys, today I'm going to be taking a look at what I think is one of the better PvP builds out there. This build's both good for 1v1s and for 3v3s from what I've seen. Starting off, you can see that it is a stun build. For those that are unaware, the stun guns build up a status effect while fighting enemies. Once the status effect is filled up, they take a large amount of burst damage. What some aren't aware of though, however, is that if you can stun an enemy while they're staggered, you can do more damage. Where a lot of other stun gun builds end up falling short. As the most popular ones right now mainline coral shields to try and have some survivability, this one is going to be using Truanos to increase offensive capabilities. If you wanted, you could still put the coral shield on the back. However, for this build, I suggest keeping with dual Truanos, as the idea in the name of the game here is very aggressive playstyle. Other stun gun builds out there, majority from what I've seen, are more bipedals and reverse joints. This one is a little different in the fact that it's going to be a quad. As for why we're going to be using quad legs instead of bipedals, it's mostly going to be due to us trying to face tank a little bit more stagger without having to use the coral shield. That way we can have the larger salvo of offensive capabilities and a little bit more range of the opponents that we can fight. The reason I say that is because with the coral shield, yes, you can parry out shots. However, it's a little easier for someone to try and range you. However, with the Truanos, you're able to throw after them your high-speed missiles in an attempt to stagger them and play catch-up, as well as comboing them with your legs to just stagger them outright even in close-range combat. Overall, this build has an alright amount of AP with 10,840, but it really is going to shine with its attitude stability about 2297. It's going to have a lot more native stagger resistance from the bipedal variants you're going to see out there. We really want to lean into that since that we're not going to be using a coral shield on this build. As far as speed, this thing has a very nice 349 base speed. We want this so that when we're on people, we're able to stick on them a little easier without having to blow through our energy as much. That way we can reserve that for maneuvers and dodging. For the booster, I use a BST G2 P06 Speed. The reason I like this booster a lot is mostly just because it's pretty balanced. Other boosters can do things a little bit better. If you're finding that you like to do a little bit more quick boosts, you could always use the Alula. There's a few other options that you could use. However, I just feel like these are the most balanced for our generator and this playstyle that we're going to be doing. As far as generator goes, we're going to be using the VP20C. An overall high-end medium capacity generator with decent recharge rates. That way when we have to, we can try and get up and chase somebody, but we still have a decent enough recovery that for CQC we're not going to be redding out constantly. As far as our expansion slot goes, you'll want to use Pulse Armor for this build. Since we're not having the Coral Shield on this build, you really want to keep the Pulse Armor. That way, if the going does get tough and the enemy is squeezing you a little bit, you are able to pop your shield. That way you can unload your stun pistols into them without fear of reprisal. Another reason why we'd want to use the quad legs instead of the bipedals, I just feel like they're a lot better at kicking the enemy. Personally, my favorite legs to kick someone with is the spring chickens. However, I would say the VP424s are a close second with their windmill action, and it's just very hard to dodge in a CQC kick environment from a quad. And the whole point of the quad legs and the Truanos at the end of the day is so that we can stagger our enemies and get more free stun shots in, as well as hopefully proc while they're staggered. Many of you would want to use the Noctra Hair arms here because of their high firing stability of 160, however, you'd probably be wrong in this use case. The arms we're going to be using are the Tian Quang. The reason that we're going to be using these are for the recoil control. In testing, these pistols seem to, even though they have a low amount of recoil, you're firing them off so fast that they really do benefit from a higher recoil control. The only arms that are better than these are the Wrecker arms when it comes to recoil control. However, they do lose a lot as far as armor and health. And at the end of the day, since we aren't using the Coral Shield on this build as some other builds do, we're going to be wanting that extra armor and health. The core I decided to go for here was the Firmeza. The main reason here is just for the speed. The way I see it, our attitude stability is already decently high enough, so we don't have to use something like the VE40A for the extra bit of attitude stability, health, and armor. However, if you do feel like you are having trouble, it is an alternative core option that may end up helping you in the long run, as you do gain 2000 AP and a very large amount of defenses. However, as you do get better at your movement, I do recommend going more the speed route, as you are able to dodge more shots. As far as the head is concerned, we're going to be using the VP44D, however. It's one of the better attitude stability heads. A good alternative you could use, possibly, would be the Mind Beta. It has a little bit armor in both the kinetic and a little bit more attitude stability, but you don't really gain too much. It's all around pretty similar. I would say if you wanted to use it as a fashion choice, it's close enough that you could get away with it. One of the bread and butter items that makes this distinctly different than your normal stun gun build are the Truino needle missile launchers. These are very good missile launchers, seeing as how with two of them you have multi-shots, each doing 385 impact. They're almost like a homing Zimmerman at range. Whenever you're up on somebody and you're kicking their teeth in with your quad legs and really laying into them with your stun guns, many people do try and run away. That'll allow you a good lined up free shot with your Truinos, which will inevitably stagger them, allowing you to get another proc off on building up your stun pistols. As well as all around just being pretty decent for just laying in extra damage, as they also boast decent attack power, each with 415 times 2 damage. As far as FCS, I went for the Talbot. While there are better close-range assist FCSs, even the one right next to it with 83 on the Abbott, we do lose a lot on the missile lock correction, and we really do want that missile lock correction on this build for the Truinos. You want to have this high missile lock because the way you're going to be using these Truinos when you're fighting is going to be an opportunity attack or looking to fish for staggers with them, and you don't want to be leaving yourself open when you go for that stagger shot. For generator, we're going to be using the VP20C. I find that this is a pretty decent higher capacity mid-range generator, as it has a pretty decent capacity recharge rate, and it's just overall pretty decent in general. You'll want to have that higher capacity for whenever people start trying to run away from you, and that way you can assault boost after them. Overall, the build is pretty maneuverable. Even when fighting in close range with melee builds or wheelchair tanks, the speed and maneuverability on this variant of this type of build is pretty good. I would say more often than not, this wins almost all my matches. Very rarely lose with it. The only time you're really going to lose with it is if someone's running a tank that's all lasers, or something that's just so AP heavy that you have to proc the damage so many times. Otherwise, this build really does hit hard against pretty much all enemies. Especially when fighting Zimmermans, this will really body them pretty easily.